Well, moving swiftly on, the next item of business today is a members' business debate on motion number 13248 in the name of Margaret Mitchell on sewerage sludge spreading. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put, and I'd invite those members who wish to speak in this debate to please press the request to speak buttons now or as soon as possible. Before I do invite Margaret Mitchell to open this debate, I would, however, invite members who are leaving the chamber, and indeed members of the public who are leaving the debating chamber, to do so quickly and quietly, please. Margaret Mitchell, 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. This debate provides the opportunity to set out the intolerable conditions which residents in and around the Falkirk area have been subjected to as a direct consequence of sewage sludge spreading in nearby fields. I want to acknowledge at the outset and pay tribute to the commitment and perseverance of the members of Avonbridge and Stanburn Community Council, and in particular to convener Joe Hurst and Secretary Doreen Goldie for gathering the necessary local intelligence to address this issue. The stench from the sludge has, at best, meant that residents have been unable to sit outside and enjoy their gardens or to hang out washing. In some areas, residents are not even able to open their windows on hot days, as the smell would make the rooms inside their homes unbearable to live in. At worst, the stench has resulted in residents who suffer from lung conditions, including asthma, experiencing deterioration in their conditions when the sludge was spread onto nearby fields. But perhaps the most shocking incident occurred last year when a primary school sports day in California had to be cancelled because the stench was causing the children to vomit in the playground. It is astounding that even after this incident, which was witnessed by a local community police officer, absolutely nothing was done to address this issue, which has been ongoing not just for days, weeks, or even months, but for several years now. All this despite members of the Community Council presenting a letter of objection signed by 1,300 residents to Falkirk Council last year regarding the spreading of sewerage sludge in fields, and despite the local community officer who attended the Community Council meetings being made fully aware of these issues, and more worryingly still, the threats being made to members of the Community Council. This occurred when one individual contracted by Scottish Water to treat and spread the sludge was approached by members of the Community Council about the stench and also about the spillage of sludge on roads during transportation, creating a potential hazard. Complaints were also made to SEPA and Scottish Water to no avail. This was a situation that the constituents and the Community Council members made me aware of, and which prompted me to hold meetings with SEPA, Scottish Water, Environmental Health, Falkirk Council and Police Scotland, at which the Community Council was represented by Joe and Doreen. From these meetings, the following issues emerged. Some of the sewage had not been properly treated by those storing and distributing it to local farmers. This resulted in subsequent and more severe health issues for local residents. There is an issue about the adequacy of monitoring of the storage and processing of sewage sludge. SEPA contend that pressure on resources means those storing and distributing sewage sludge are expected to self-monitor, a situation that is open to abuse and error. There has been a total failure on the part of any of the organisations with responsibility for various aspects of monitoring the sewage sludge processing and spreading to take the lead in addressing the problem. Key analytical statistics and information on pricing was not readily available from SEPA and Scottish Water. The discrepancies in the storage and monitoring of the sludge have led Scottish Water to consider whether to take over the treatment and storage of sewage sludge in-house. This would ensure that the sludge is treated properly before being spread in dry pellet form on the fields, which should reduce the stench. No one is responsible for the monitoring of sewage sludge shipped from England or brought in from Northern Ireland to be stored and spread in Scotland. And reports persist of lorries carrying waste to holding sites in the Falkirk area at 2:30 a.m. and 4 o'clock in the morning. Speaking to their petition lodged by the Avonbridge and Stanburn Community Council and currently under consideration by the Scottish Parliament's Petition Committee, the petitioners noted that wet sewage sludge, which has not been obtained from Scottish Water, has been deposited and left on top of farmland without being properly dug in. Given all of this, it is to be hoped that the Petitions Committee will recommend that the Scottish Government take steps to end the practice of spreading human waste on fields now. For let's be quite clear, there is huge potential to make big money out of the illegal spreading of sewage sludge, with cash indiscriminately and anonymously changing hands. This presents opportunities for organised crime and money laundering. Here, ruthless individuals set up businesses which operate under different company names to make easy money at the expense of intolerable living conditions for local residents. And it's far from clear that there is due diligence in checking the legitimacy of these companies. Finally, in response to a parliamentary question I asked about sewage sludge in April this year, the Cabinet Secretary for Rural Affairs stated that there would be a report from the review group during the summer. I should be grateful if in her closing remarks the Minister could update the Parliament on the progress of this review and, crucially, commit to a timetable for action. For Presiding Officer, the unpalatable truth is that there have been discussions, meetings and consultations on sewage sludge spreading dating back to the inception of this Parliament, but the deplorable conditions local residents have been exposed to remain unchanged. It is for this reason a holistic approach is needed from SEPA, Scottish Water, local councils, Police Scotland and the Scottish Government, all of whom have, by default, failed local residents, subjecting them to a totally unacceptable living environment.
Thank you very much. I now call on Angus MacDonald to be followed by Claudia Beamish. 4 minutes or thereby, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First and foremost, can I thank Margaret Mitchell for ensuring this important issue is brought to the Parliament for debate, and can I also thank members who signed my amendment to Margaret Mitchell's motion. I know Margaret Mitchell has put a lot of effort into resolving this issue in Falkirk District, as have I. As we know, the spreading of sewage sludge on farmland has come about as a result of an EU directive banning the dumping of sewage at sea. And it's been an issue which has attracted a great deal of debate and a number of complaints in my constituency, not least in the Upper Braes area, which includes Slomanan and the surrounding villages. I set up a problem-solving partnership meeting and held a number of meetings with SEPA and Scottish Water to try to ensure my constituents were not inconvenienced in the way that they had been for a number of years. And as Margaret Mitchell has mentioned, over 1,300 members of the community have previously submitted letters of objection regarding the practice to Falkirk Council. And as we know, Avonbridge and Stanburn Community Council lodged a petition earlier this year with this Parliament's Public Petitions Committee regarding sewage sludge spreading. As a result of this pressure, Scottish Water has improved procedures for sewage disposal and is now only transporting dried sewage pellets to Falkirk District, which are treated before arriving for disposal in the Falkirk area, which is welcome progress indeed. However, as Margaret Mitchell did mention, there is sewage sludge being received from firms other than Scottish Water, which is still an issue. It has significantly cut down on the smells emanating from the fields after spreading or from the heaps of sewage sludge which were stockpiled at various locations around Slomanan. However, farmers are clearly still entitled to use that resource as a fertiliser. There is, however, another issue which the Minister should be made aware of, Much of the waste currently causing inconvenience and annoyance to my constituents in Upper Braes would seem to be food waste, not sewage, sludge or pellets, which is being transported to a couple of local lagoons, and the gas created by anaerobic respiration during the decompression of this organic material causes an unpleasant smell, which can be confused with the smell emanating from the sewage sludge. Now, the smell from the trucks transporting this waste can also be overpowering, and I have had reports of children vomiting in the street, not just at the local primary school, after these lorries passed through the local villages. However, SEPA have stated that this smell is not a public health issue, and that soil samples of the farmland where the material is spread indicated no public health issues at all. But this is a major concern of mine following information I've received from SEPA. I do have serious concerns regarding these lagoons, which are used to store digestate from anaerobic digestion, and I believe there's a serious loophole which results in them not being properly regulated. They don't require any type of planning permission, so they're not regulated, and they don't fall under either local authorities or SEPA's remit for checking, even though the product in the lagoon has been used in the production of sludge for spreading. And I've been informed by SEPA that they're unable to test the contents, as they need to know what they're testing for in the first place. Now, waste management operators are required to keep records, which SEPA are entitled to inspect. However, if you have, for example, an unscrupulous operator who does not keep accurate records, then there's no knowing what could be being spread on the land. It is this worrying aspect that I believe needs to be looked at in more detail. However, I've alerted SEPA to my concerns and expect a meeting with senior officials soon. I'm also aware that SEPA are actively pursuing a meeting with Falkirk Council to agree on each other's remits and responsibilities. However, in the meantime, the lagoons go unchecked. So while I welcome the fact that Scottish Water has been directing sewage sludge away from Falkirk District in recent months, there needs to be a long-term strategy. And I believe we should look no further than Sweden, where only 14% of sewage is spread on land, and the Netherlands, I believe, incinerates the vast majority of its sewage. In Sweden, incineration... Sorry, Presiding Officer, I've just noticed the time. I'll try and speed up. In Sweden, incineration fits in with a larger Swedish goal of recovering the important minerals from their sludge to be reused, and currently 49.83% of sludge in Sweden is disposed of by incineration. When sludge is incinerated using monocombustion, the ash can be processed to extract the phosphorus and other useful materials. So, cutting out the technicalities of the benefits of incineration, I welcome the Scottish Government's sludge review, which I hope will see an end result of more appropriate ways of disposing of sewage, preferably through incineration, and I look forward to tighter regulation on lagoons which are used to produce sludge, which will ultimately be spread on farmland, and I look forward to the Minister's response. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I now call on Claudia Beamish to be followed by John Wilson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I too would like to thank Margaret Mitchell for bringing this motion to the Scottish Parliament, as my own constituents are also experiencing many problems associated with the practice of spreading human sewage sludge. I want also to put on record today the commitment of the Douglas Community Council in my region and that of other residents and constituents who have highlighted this concern. In June, representatives of Douglas Community Council and I met with Zero Waste Scotland, Scottish Power and SEPA to contribute to the review of this activity, which I, along with others in this chamber today, had called for. It was heartening to hear that the need for a review was recognised, and we welcomed the opportunity to express the reality of having this practice on your doorstep. The committed interest was valued, and this needs to be ongoing. I was also encouraged by the willingness to listen, and that there was an acceptance that the aspects of the current process should be improved. I understand that Zero Scotland's aim was, as highlighted by other members, to have their recommendations with the Minister by the end of August, and would be grateful for an update on the timescales for this today. The use of human sewage sludge is an emotive subject, and while I recognise there needs to be ways found to handle and dispose of human waste, the general public cannot continue to be subjected to the practice, if at all, certainly as it currently stands. Odour, road spillages, increased heavy traffic, proximity to residential properties all have to be considered, along with the points made by other members, when approving suitable locations for this activity, if indeed it is to go ahead at all. And Margaret Mitchell has highlighted many of these concerns. My constituents living near the Restoration Opencast site at Glen Taggart have been subjected to all these outcomes of this activity. And in addition to this, given Glen Taggart's location near Douglas Water and the nature of the site, there are very serious concerns about the impact on watercourses. Aside from these daily impositions on the local community, there are also wider aspects that need attention and clarity. Firstly, the greater consistency is needed in the treatment of human sewage sludge. The public have to have the confidence that the sludge is used has been treated to remove pathogens which pose a risk to human health. The Glen Taggart site was regularly used by dog walkers, yet during this activity there has been no signage, and I've been unable to ascertain who is responsible for signage to warn the public about this spreading. And this must be addressed. During my own inquiries into the sewage sludge issue, I was not reassured that the process of heat treatment was consistently applied. Can we be confident that there is a contingency for waste treatment facility outages? Waste that is not heat treated must not be sent out for use, even in the present circumstances and with the present regulation. It is still not clear to me if this is being addressed. Secondly, is the point that the review has to ensure that the correct classification is given to this practice. Its currently exempt status does not reflect the agency input I believe is required to adequately monitor it. The categorisation needs changing, in my view, to a higher risk category in order to enable adequate monitoring by SEPA if indeed it proceeds. And thirdly, there needs to be more robust traceability of waste. Traceability ensures that operators are accountable for their waste management. My Douglas constituents have concerns about the volume of waste coming into the Glen Taggart site and indeed where it originates from. This information has to be quantifiable and assessed. The concerns relating to this practice are wide-ranging, from public nuisance to health and safety to accountability. This review has the scope to ensure that these are addressed by tightening the guidance and legislation at every stage of the process, and I hope this will not be a missed opportunity. I ask the Minister if this process should be continuing at all in the future, and if so, if not, are the alternatives being looked at? And finally, I want to associate myself with the remarks of Angus MacDonald about the loopholes in relation to food waste in lagoons, which I am of the belief that needs another members' debate, and that is for another day. But I look forward to hearing the Minister's remarks, and again thank Margaret Mitchell.
Thanks very much. Now call on John Wilson to be followed by Kenny Gibson. Thank you, Presiding Officer. May I commend Margaret Mitchell for bringing this motion before us today. The spread of sewage sludge is an important issue that affects a great number of people, quite a large area of Scotland, because it's not just confined to the Braes area or the Avonbridge and Stanburn area. It impacts upon many communities throughout Scotland, and I hope by highlighting this issue today will highlight the issue to many communities throughout Scotland, that this Parliament is looking at this issue with some serious intent to make sure changes take place. The matter came before the Public Petitions Committee, which I sit on, as a petition from the Avonbridge and Stanburn Community Council, and it clearly highlighted the issues regarding the noxious odours that last for days or more, sewage waste damaging soils and water in the area that has been dumped, and the potential impact this has on human and animal welfare. And Margaret Mitchell, I think, ably identified the issue of the impact on children in the area. As mentioned in the motion, the spreading of this sludge has adversely affected people in the local area and their ability to do basic things, which Margaret Mitchell also highlighted, such as just hanging out your washing on the day to get it dried, or even opening their windows. This is a serious environmental and social concern. I am glad to see that the Scottish Government have announced a review into the spreading of sewage sludge, but we must ensure that review is an open, transparent and democratic process, that communities who are affected should be consulted and involved in this review.
because there's no point in carrying out a desktop review or a review amongst the officials who are charged with overseeing the legislation in this area at the present moment. They must listen to the communities concerned, the community councils, the tenants and residents associations, because those are the people who suffer the worst effects. When we heard the evidence at the Public Petitions Committee from SNH and SEPA, they clearly highlighted that there was an inconsistency in who was responsible for monitoring, with some of the monitoring being carried out by local authority, environmental services departments, and some being carried out by SEPA. Clearly, this inconsistency has to be reviewed, and even in evidence to the Public Petitions Committee, the SEPA representative said that there were inconsistencies in the legislation, there was an inconsistency in the regulations. We must look at those, and we must have a body that takes overall responsibility for ensuring that the sewage sludge that's being spread in Scotland is being adequately monitored. Because I think Margaret Mitchell highlighted that it's not just a case of sewage sludge that's being produced in Scotland, it's sewage sludge that's been transported from other parts of the UK without the appropriate monitoring and regulation being applied. And that is a worrying factor for many communities throughout Scotland. The other issue that I'd like to highlight in this area is that sewage sludge spreading has taken place for decades, if not hundreds of years. The difficulty we have now with the continued erosion of greenbelt land and residential properties being built closer and closer to farmland, then the impact is more apparent on those communities, those new communities, who may not be used to living behind a farm or close to a farm. And really, we need to make sure that the regulation is in place. And I hope the Minister, in her response, will indicate what action was taken to include communities that are affected and those not declaring an issue at the present moment were consulted on this review, and any indication of whether or not their views were taken on board in considering the review that was carried out. Because clearly we have to ensure that communities are fully engaged in this process and communities know who is ultimately responsible for monitoring this sewage sludge being spread throughout Scotland. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Now call on Kenny Gibson to be followed by Hanzala Malik.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I congratulate Margaret Mitchell for securing this valuable debating time on what is an important issue for many. It's certainly been the subject of much correspondence to my local constituency office. I would also like to thank my colleague Angus MacDonald for the time and effort he's put into helping construct a considered and evidence-based approach to dealing with this controversial matter. Whilst I'm unfamiliar with the exact situation in Falkirk, my own constituency, many constituents in the communities of Barmill, Beath, Burnhouse and Gateside have reported similar concerns as a result of sewage sludge spreading. Although not a direct public health issue, due to storage and subsequent spreading of sewage sludge during recent months, local residents have been unable to hang out washing, enjoy their gardens, open windows or even work outdoors. Not only was the nauseous odour a problem to many, but swarms of flies also had a serious negative impact on my constituents' reasonable enjoyment of their home and local community. Following the treatment of human sewage and industrial effluent sewage treatment works, a residual sludge is left behind, and this can then be dewatered and used to produce sludge cake or sludge pellets. The industry refers to these products as biosolids, which can be used to fertilise land. But this should not be at the expense of the quality of life of our constituents. Dewatering and the creation of pellets should tackle the issue raised by Margaret Mitchell in her motion, where she points out that the sludge residue itself was spilled onto roads during transportation. And this would seem, at least in Scottish Water's case, to be a commitment on their behalf to making the whole process safer and more sanitary through use of pellets. But wet sewage, as Margaret Mitchell contends, should be banned. And I think in terms of this whole issue, what has concerned many of us is the failure of the regulatory response to genuine constituency concerns that have been raised across many communities. Whilst in my constituency in Falkirk the process has clearly caused significant public nuisance, it must be remembered that up until 1998 this form of waste was simply dumped at sea. I am pleased to note that on 6 March this year, the Scottish Environmental Protection Agency, Scottish Water and Scottish Government began a formal review of the legislation and guidance in relation to sewage sludge use on land, as we've heard. In setting out the terms of the review, Rural Affairs Secretary Richard Lockhead mentioned the benefits of the process, but went on to say, and I quote, "Over the last year, a number of public complaints have been made. In light of that, I've commissioned a review of legislation and guidance to determine what is and isn't acceptable. I am confident this review will help to ensure we strike the right balance between the benefits of using sewage sludge and the controls that protect both the public and wider environmental interests. I was pleased to note this review will take into account the views of stakeholders and community groups, ensuring a wide range of both expert opinion and local experience is heard. I look forward to the results of the review, but surely after almost 6 months, this must now be due. And I trust stricter controls and oversight will be introduced to ensure that communities are not adversely impacted upon in the way many of my constituents have. Clearly, many people felt helpless that whether they contacted the local authorities and Environmental Health Department or SEPA, it didn't seem that anything was being done to try and alleviate their concerns and the difficulties which they were having to endure over the summer months, and that is clearly unacceptable. Presiding Officer, I also note with interest the comments Angus MacDonald made in his amendment regarding the merits of increasing incineration capacity to follow the Northern European model, and believe that along with the Scottish Government review and best practice, this is a potential to alleviate many of the problems communities of Scotland have been facing.
Thank you very much. Now call on Hanzala Malik, after which we move to closing speech from the Minister.
Thank you very much and good afternoon, Presiding Officer. I also thank Margaret Mitchell for securing today's debate. It is a motion that raises an issue that seems to get a lot of people very quickly upset. This issue has come before the Public Petitions Committee of the Scottish Parliament on several occasions over the years as well, which just goes to show that feelings are very high on this issue. Most recently, in June of this year, the petition has been lodged on the Scottish Parliament website, calling for the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to ban the use of sludge sewage on land and to look at alternative acceptable methods of disposal as adopted in other European countries, which I have to say are not too dissimilar to ourselves in the UK. Now we need to get rid of this waste somehow. But, of course, no one wants their back door or local area to stink. Poor management of the spreading of sludge, such as spillage, particularly while transporting between locations, and not providing fair warning to local residents makes a difficult situation much worse. Research into exposing of sludge conducted by the European Union showed that there is no evidence of sludge spreading causing health problems aside from the impact of the strange, unpleasant smell. We need to get this right, and when it goes wrong, apologies should be made and lessons learned. Other ways of disposing of sewage sludge should be found and can be looked at to resolve the solution at the earliest possible stages. The fact that the report is being compiled, the fact that it's taken over 6 months, I think is unhelpful, because people's aspirations and hopes are for a much quicker response to the problem, particularly those who actually face this difficulty. So I call upon the Scottish Government to have a good look at views to addressing this issue and find solutions at the earliest possible opportunity. May I also go on to say that I'm quite concerned that sometimes, because of lack of restriction, there may be a possibility of raw sewage being used to contaminate our land as well. and we will be familiar with the foot and mouth disease and how that came about. I think using unsafe sewage on our lands can be just as dangerous and have just as much an impact on our agricultural industry as that did. Therefore, I think that we need to take on board the concerns of people. We need to take on board that, yes, we are not accustomed to those strong odours and smells, and when it happens, it's very unpleasant, particularly for those who actually live in close proximity of where the sludge is being sprayed. And also, I think, which concerns me, is the lack of legislation in terms of the quality of the use, because I'm fearful that it may actually endanger people in the long term. Thank you very much, Presiding Officer.
Thank you very much. I now call on Minister Aileen MacLeod to close this debate on behalf of the Government. 7 minutes are thereby, please, Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And like others, I'd also like to begin by thanking Margaret Mitchell for bringing such an important issue regarding the spreading of sewage sludge on land to the Chamber for debate this afternoon, and to also thank Angus MacDonald for his amendment, because I know that the issues that have been discussed today are for both the communities and individuals affected have been crucial to their quality of life. And also, just in terms of what Margaret Mitchell said earlier about the intolerable conditions which so many people have been exposed to, which I agree have been totally and utterly unacceptable. So for that reason, I am extremely grateful to all of my colleagues for their contributions to this debate, and I know how tirelessly my colleagues have worked on behalf of their constituents, in terms of the fact we've got a petition before the Petitions Committee, a number of PQs, and the written correspondence with the Cabinet Secretary. So I do appreciate and thank them for all their efforts in bringing this to attention for the Parliament this afternoon. And as members will be aware, the Cabinet Secretary for Rural Affairs, Food and Environment, Richard Lochhead, announced earlier this year that there would be a review of the storage and spreading of sewage sludge on land in Scotland. Now, this debate is obviously particularly timely, since it allows that review to be informed by the points that have been raised this afternoon. Now, that sewage sludge is being led by the Scottish Government, SEPA and Scottish Water. The purpose of the review is to find ways to promote safe sludge storage and use, and to protect local communities, public health and the environment. So the scope of the review has encompassed the use of sewage sludge on non-agricultural land for the purposes of restoration, as well as the spreading of sewage sludge on agricultural land. It's covered the licensing of operators and activities, as well as the treatment, testing and storage of sludge, and health issues, because I mention health because, obviously when the smell and the stench gets really bad, it can exacerbate pre-existing health conditions. So we are looking to address this as well. It also deals with the land classification, traceability, data management and monitoring. And in addition, the review has considered possible improvements to legislation and guidance. Most importantly of all, I think the review has taken full account of the needs of local communities in dealing with issues that directly affect them, such as odour and noise during unsocial hours. We know also that, I think a point that was raised by Claudia Beamish, that communication and consultation and notification of those who live near sites where sewage sludge is used are important, and so I've looked at that as well. The review team has engaged directly with a range of key stakeholders, including members of Avonbridge and Stanburn Community Council, as well as Claudia Beamish and her constituents from Douglas Community Council, local authorities and Health Protection Scotland. And this has enabled, I think, the team to hear directly about local experiences and concerns and the evidence on environmental and health effects. Now, I am aware of the experiences of both Margaret Mitchell and Angus MacDonald's constituents, specifically in the Falkirk area, and I know that there have been other incidents in Scotland over the past couple of years that have led quite rightly and understandably to serious complaints. Now, it's clear that sewage sludge has caused a significant problem in this area, and I am pleased to see that Scottish Water has taken a number of remedial actions during the past few months to try and tackle these very serious issues.
Mitchell.
Give us a date for the review group findings to be published, given it's now 6 months since it was first convened? And does she agree that these findings should include the absolute crucial necessity to have a holistic approach to this and one organisation taking the lead to ensure adequate monitoring?
Minister.
Presiding Officer, I was going to come to that point towards the end of my speech, but I will make sure that we, as in my remarks. I mean, since February this year, Scottish Water has imposed a complete embargo on any of its sludge and other organic materials being recycled in the Falkirk area. There has also been an increase in the auditing of contractors' activities, including spot checks by Scottish Water and more monitoring of material stockpiles held by contractors. In addition, community councils in the area now have direct access to Scottish Water waste managers. I understand that these actions have improved the local situation, and it is our intention through the sludge review to make sure that that improvement is sustained and built upon, not just in the Falkirk area, but elsewhere in Scotland. Now, Margaret Mitchell mentioned in her speech about the sewage sludge that comes from other parts of the UK. The review has looked at this and is finding a way to try and deal with this. I think on the serious points that have been raised by Angus MacDonald regarding storage of anaerobic digestate, SEPA has said that they will monitor the situation and assess whether the storage of anaerobic digestion requires further regulatory control, and I'm glad to hear that the member is meeting with SEPA to discuss these concerns. And it is clear, Presiding Officer, from the concerns that have been expressed by the public and reflected in Parliament here this afternoon, that the outcomes from the sewage sludge review are awaited with great interest. We want to make sure that where sludge is stored or spread to land, it is done safely and does not cause the nuisance or inconvenience to the general public. We are confident that the sludge review will identify ways to avoid incidents of the kind that we've heard about today, which have been totally and utterly unacceptable. The review group, I understand, will shortly submit its conclusions. It will be later this month for ministers to consider how to proceed. And I think it is important to stress that we will consult on any proposed actions that may involve changes to legislation or statutory guidance. And as part of our Better Environmental Regulation programme, the Scottish Government and SEPA are working jointly to deliver a new environmental enforcement framework for Scotland, which includes a range of new proportionate enforceable measures for SEPA. So can I conclude, Presiding Officer, by reiterating my thanks to Margaret Mitchell and to all the other members who have spoken in this afternoon's debate for bringing such an important issue as this to the Chamber, and for everybody in terms of the extremely helpful contributions, which will be very helpful in terms of taking the review forward.
Many thanks. And I thank you all for taking part in this important debate, and I now suspend this meeting until 2:15 this afternoon. Thank you very much.